Hello, so I wrote my answers down because there's a lot of information to give in a little short amount of time, so I'm going to be reading from this. So to answer question number 1, which says, explain how your learning objective connects and or should be used within your evaluation section. So I believe that the purpose of the learning objective is to define clear instructional goals that educators need to follow and students need to learn. Our learning objective is meant to clearly outline a standard and a substandard that we're trying to teach. Within that objective are the options that we intend to offer students to demonstrate their understanding. This is where the quantifiable products come into play. These quantifiable products on the learning objective are meant to connect to our evaluation on our 5E lesson plan so that they reinforce each other. Our evaluation section is the quantifiable products. This is how us as educators can gauge a student's understanding. We are basically evaluating or assessing their knowledge and understanding of the content standard that we're teaching. The learning objective serves as a basic outline of what we want students to know and how we'll measure their understanding or their mastery, whereas the 5E lesson plan kind of extends on that information in a more detailed fashion, but both end in evaluation because we will use those quantifiable products to measure whether students have achieved the learning objective. It's the end goal, basically. So this is week 5. So for the first reading, this reading kind of breaks down the 5E learning cycle. The section that talks about the evaluation stage is important to our 5E lesson plan because it stresses the importance of not just evaluating students, but also teachers needing to be objective so that they can evaluate the planning and presentation of their lesson as well. The second and third reading both talk about backwards design. Basically, as teachers and students, there's an end goal, which is to learn something. As teachers, we want to teach something, and students need to learn what we're teaching. So getting goals or setting goals first is key to aligning the rest of the learning objective with what should be taken away from the lesson. So then for week 6, for the first one, UTech teacher and student for evaluate. That reading clearly defined what the student and the teacher does during the evaluation stage of the 5E model, which is really critical for us to know for our lesson plan because we need to really kind of break down those components of what goes into an evaluation on both sides. The second reading, chapter 6 for the Volts and Sims, that chapter discusses the difference between content standard and method standards. The first being that students are expected to kind of internalize information, and method standards are defined as having a definite end product, which is also important for us to understand because we're not just giving them information where they're expected to, think about that internally or just understand it. We want them to demonstrate it, which is where the method standards, from my understanding, come into play. The third one for Volts and Sims, chapter 7, that is all about students getting choice, which is critical within our learning objective because the learning objective requires multiple product types that give students a choice that aligns with their strengths. That encompasses what UDL is about. That encompasses what this class is about. What the whole point of this lesson plan is about is providing choices for our students. The fourth reading, Novak chapter 10, this explains the importance of student feedback, which is an important component to all instruction. Like for our learning objective, it will be important for my co-teachers and I to survey our students so we can measure their clarity of the lesson. This process kind of allows for future modification of a lesson if a student didn't get it. We can kind of go back as teachers and redesign where we went wrong or where there wasn't clarity. The fifth reading, Novak chapter 11, talks about the evaluation period and how that should be a continuous process throughout the lesson, but a summative assessment at the end of the lesson should be administered, whether it's a choice assessment like we are doing through the quantifiable products in our learning objective, or standardized exams. It just talks about all of these readings talk about, it breaks down the components of like the 5E learning cycle and the importance of like evaluation and assessment. Because without that, then there's no way to gauge student understanding and there's no way to make sure that teachers are being clear within their learning objective and instructional methods. Thank you.